We step in now to our final module, which is about the idea of renewable energy. And let's just make it a little broader than that, call it the decarbonization of the energy mix. And we're going to take a look at the way things are today, but also what changes and challenges might be necessary as people think about decarbonizing the economy. So principally today, we're going to talk about wind and solar and how they fit into the mix, specifically into the U.S. energy grid, but we're also going to talk about some of the issues with them. So let's kind of clear the air right up front. The idea that environmental issues and the environmental impact and progress are at loggerheads with each other is not new. You go back to London and coal many centuries ago when they just totally polluted their air because they were doing everything with coal. Many times we've been told that we're running out of energy. These things are not true. So we've been through this before, if you will, and we're going to work our way through it again. One of the things I want you to keep in mind as we look at the energy mix is currently wind and solar are all about electricity generation, and we're going to see that there are some key parts of our economy that are very hard to do just based off of electricity. When we look at the future, we really are trying to balance two very hard questions. The first is, how should we factor in the negative impact of carbon dioxide emissions? This is the idea of a carbon tax, which we're not going to talk about specifically in this particular course, but some of you are researching that. And so environmentalists would say that for centuries, we've gotten away with burning fossil fuels, generating carbon dioxide, and haven't had to pay for it. And so they would argue that the cost of fossil fuels is artificially low because the carbon is not taxed for its negative byproduct. Fair statement. On the other hand, what we're going to see is, as we make our decisions, how do we charge for lack of reliability or dispatchability or intermittency of all of the renewable sources? Because as you try to do economic comparisons, that can become quite relevant. So what I'm going to try to model for you in this presentation is I'm going to try to present the most unbiased information that I can. I'm going to clearly identify my sources, and most of them are the Energy Information Association, which is a branch of the United States government, which I think is unbiased, relatively unbiased at least. And if it's biased towards anything, I think it's slightly biased toward the renewable side. And so I'm going to try to play it as straight up the middle as I can. Some of the things I'm going to say, if you're a huge renewable fan, you're not going to like because there are parts of the story that perhaps you've not heard before. But again, I'll try to play it straight. As we talk about decarbonizing the economy, a really smart place to start is to remind ourselves just how much we currently rely on fossil fuels. The number worldwide is about 85%. You can see in 2019, the number in the United States was 89% of our energy came from fossil fuels. And you go, well, 11% for renewables, that's actually pretty good, higher than maybe some of you thought it would be. But notice when you look at the renewables, there's some things in there you hadn't thought about. One is the idea, a lot of it's hydroelectric power plants, which is water passing through dams. Let's talk about environmental impact. Once upon a time, that was all free land that was had to be, quote unquote, put underneath water by a huge dam to create the hydroelectric resource. So there wasn't, it's not like there's not some environmental impact to that. Also, if you look, 20% of it is the burning of wood. That's a particularly blunt way to call that a renewable resource. Biofuels, 22%, that's ethanol that's mixed in with gas. But you can see wind is growing. Solar, still really a small part of the energy mix. And I wanted to use this chart to remind us again of how we use energy. Specifically look at the high percentage that goes into the transportation sector, because transportation sector is going to be one of the more challenging things as we look to decarbonize the economy. The rest of it is easier to electrify, provided we're not talking about just the chemicals that go in, the chemicals that come from oil and natural gas that go in as feedstocks into the various manufacturing processes. So when we have this discussion, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about replacing 89% or reducing significantly below 89% the current energy usage. The first technology we want to look at is solar. Notice this chart of the United States. Obviously, the redder it is, the better it is for solar. And so you can see that Western Texas, New Mexico, most of Arizona, good chunks of southern Nevada, and very southeastern parts of California are good places for solar. You might wonder, why isn't Florida a great place for solar? It's hot, the sun shines there. Humidity. The water vapor, which is humidity in the air, attenuates the solar heating capabilities. So when you look at the United States, not large sections of it are really great for solar power. There are two basic types of solar technologies to be used for solar power. The one is called concentrated solar power. You actually probably understand them best just by looking at the pictures, and this is about focusing the sun on a particular spot, running fluids through pipes and things like that to heat the fluids. Those fluids then go off and they run steam turbines. The advantage of this, in theory, is that those heated fluids should allow you to generate electricity for several hours after the sun actually goes down, which is important because that's a peak requirement for electricity. The reality is this stuff is expensive and it's not worked very well. The picture you see on the right is a major site that is southwest of Las Vegas. Billions of dollars, and it's just not working. What you do see more of now in the United States is the construction of utility scale PV photovoltaic solar systems. So these are like large fields where you'll see all these solar panels just laid out on the ground. If you look at the chart, the declining lines show just how much the price has dropped. When I started teaching this course 5 years ago, my takeaway comment to everybody was, solar is not cost competitive. It just isn't. That has dramatically changed over the past 5 years to the point where solar, when we look at some data later, is actually one of the most cost-effective sources of energy. You can see that the capacity installations are still pretty small. Why has the price of solar dropped so much? And that's simply competition in the manufacturing sector. China, several countries in China have gotten into this in a big way. They've taken a real cost leadership strategy. They've operated on very thin, some would allege negative margins, and they have driven the price down. And so this has dramatically changed the playing ground, if you will, for solar energy. But when I say solar energy, most of you think about those panels that you see up on the rooftops of people's homes. And that's fair enough. That's residential solar. That is where solar actually got started, if you will. And residential solar still consists about a third of the total solar capability in the United States. You see the dark red of California and the pink of Arizona. That says, not surprisingly, that's where the most utility solar is, and it's also where the most residential solar is. But as we talk about residential solar, you can see that it's kind of peaked. The installations have kind of peaked in the last several years, and you don't see as much and you don't hear as much about people putting new solar panels on top of their roofs. Why not? Well, we're going to watch two videos in the next video that's going to answer that question.